World War II was one of the most brutal and serious wars of recent history. With over 25 different countries involved, it is a war that will always be remembered. Although the history of the war is well documented and studied closely, the remaining first-hand experiences are being lost with the many veterans who served. I have interviewed my neighbor, Foster DiGiacomo, about his experience serving in World War II.
My mother and father took me down to the train station at South Station, and we went over to Paris Island.
Foster's service began on Paris Island. Paris Island is used for the training of enlisted Marines, such as Foster. This is where he spent the boot camp phase of his training.
That night, I'm lying in bed, and I heard, "Mom, Mom, I want to go home."
This is a common story for most Marines in their first few days of service. Once the brutal process of training has started, the fate of these soldiers dawns on them. At home, the war was romanticized, setting expectations of the service very differently from the often shocking truth.
The first thing we did was learn the manual of arms, the movement of your rifle, right shoulder arms, left shoulder arms, port arms. They taught us bayonet, knife fighting, all the jujitsu.
The training was rigorous and diverse. Every Marine, whether they saw combat or not, had to be trained to adapt to their environment, wherever they may have been sent. It was worth preparing every Marine with every possible skill they could use, as the nature of any war is unpredictable.
The first thing that I did every morning is say a prayer. Please God, let me make it through today.
As a result of this, lots of Marines develop superstitions or traditions that might bring them good luck in their endeavors. After being exposed to the harsh truth of the war, praying for good luck brings soldiers a sense of relief within the chaos.
I was never in combat. I was sent to Texas to learn aviation radio, which was the Morse code.
Many Marines never see combat. Foster was hoping to be stationed in Japan, but instead, he was sent to aviation radio school to learn about Morse code. Morse code was heavily used in order to transport secret telegrams and was one of the main sources of communication to aircrafts. Many important battles relied on Air Force only, such as Black Thursday over North Korea.
One day I got called in to the commanding officer's office, and he said, they are looking for officer candidates. I didn't sign up to be an officer candidate. I signed up to go out and kill Japs.
Due to the high casualties in Japan, the U.S. was losing many officers. To fill this gap, they went to several enlisted Marines and essentially drafted them in an officer candidate training program.
Right about that time, it was 1945, they dropped the bomb.
Right.
The atomic bombing of Japan was the most extreme and final point of the combat between the U.S. and Japan. The war on Japan had become a war of attrition. The Japanese showed no sign of surrender, and America showed no sign of letting up. Truman was faced with the option to either use nuclear weapons on Japan or invade. Fortunately for Foster and the other active Marines, Truman chose to bomb.
We never knew anything about the atomic bomb. I want to show you the guy who saved my neck.
President Harry Truman sent Foster and every other enlisted Marine a personally signed letter thanking them for their service.
He saved my neck. Just before they dropped the bomb, they had been planning this for a couple of years. They called it Operation Olympic. It was the invasion of Japan. If it wasn't for the bomb, we were ready to go.
Foster and many other fellow Marines see the bombing as the reason their life was saved. Unfortunately, this was only a win for the Allied powers. Up to 146,000 people were killed in this bombing, and the long-term radiation increased cancer cases dramatically in Japanese citizens.
And so they said, you have an option. We would like to have you join the reserve. No question about that. Home. Discharge. Little did I know that I did the right thing. Right after that was Korea, and they grabbed all the reserve guys and threw them in there. I got out of that one.
Korea was another of the most horrific stages of World War II. There were nearly 5 million casualties across both forces, 40,000 of which were American troops. There were 135,000 troops in total, and about 16 countries sent in their own military. The U.S. spent upwards of $67 billion on the war. There are still 7,704 American troops unaccounted for. In Foster's case, he dodged this bullet and decided to go straight home. Many Marines had their priorities set straight. They never wanted to return to the war for fear that they might never really leave.
I think I got 4 that got killed. 2 at the Battle of the Bulge. You can't be in the service unless you're young. You can't do it.
On the return home, many veterans questioned, what next, after the structure of the war was suddenly absent from their lives. Some found a job and raised a family, and some, like Foster, went back to school.
They had passed the GI Bill. That was the best legislation in the whole 20th century.
The GI Bill, formerly known as the Servicemen's Readjustment Act, was intended to help veterans in their return home. It helped over 8 million veterans and covered Foster's college expenses. Unfortunately, the consequence of suddenly paying every veteran from one war led to riots. Thousands of veterans from World War I came to the Capitol demanding their bonus, raising the question of a veteran's rights.
My objective was to complete college, get a job, get married, and that's what I did.
Foster held an experience very close to the war. Every man in his family had volunteered in the war at their time. He'd gone through the experience of boot camp and training for a Marine, and narrowly missed being sent to Korea and the potential invasion of Japan. Stories like Foster's, or any veteran, are crucial to be told today. Despite textbooks and advanced classes on history, the true history is told through the passing down of first-hand experience.